Okay, year 11. First, Mr. Austin video of the new school year, and I'm going to talk to you in this video about something that we've been looking at this week and last week, the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about those two things because I think that a few of you were struggling a little bit to understand it, which is fine, because hopefully this will clear it up for you. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the Truman Doctrine. Okay, I'm going to start talking about that. Now, the Truman Doctrine, in very basic terms, is America saying that they were going to stop communism spreading. Okay, that's the Truman Doctrine in a nutshell, really. That's a very basic way of looking at it, but that's essentially what it was saying. A doctrine, if you're struggling with that word, because it's a bit of a complicated word, a doctrine is basically a belief or a policy. So essentially it's Truman, who, as we know, was the American president at the time. It's his belief or his policy that it's America's job to stop communism spreading. Okay. Now, Truman announced his doctrine partly because Britain, us, had been helping the Greek government fight communism in Greece. There was a communist force that were trying to take over the government, and Britain had been giving Greece help. They'd been giving them money and aid and weaponry, but the problem was Britain was running out of money really after the war. We'd been left in quite a bad way after the war, and we were really struggling, and we announced that we were going to withdraw from Greece on the 31st of March 1947. So when we announced this, Truman thought, well, I've got a choice here. I can either leave it and do nothing, and Greece will almost certainly then fall to communism and it'll become a communist country, or I can do something about it, and he chose option B. So Truman wanted to step in and help the Greeks. He wanted to help them fight communism. So he decided to provide the Greeks with, well, what we'd been providing them with, the weaponry and the money and the aid that they needed to fight the communist force in Greece. So he did it, as I say, to stop communism hitting Greece and Greece becoming a communist country, because as we know, communism had already spread to many countries in Eastern Europe after the war. We talked about that in an earlier lesson. And Truman was worried that if he let Greece become communist, if he did nothing and he let Greece fall to communism, then other countries would follow as well, particularly Italy. Now, Italy isn't too far away from Greece, and Italy, much like Britain and a lot of Europe, was again struggling financially after the war. And Truman was worried that, as I say, Italy would become communist, that Greece would fall, and then it would naturally spread all the way to Italy, because people in Italy were struggling. It was quite poor, and people weren't in a good way. And as we know, as we've talked about, communism tends to do well in countries that are poor, that are struggling, because people like the idea of equality. So again, Truman was worried that it wouldn't just stop at Greece; it would spread and spread and spread. So Truman went to Congress, which is part of the American government, and he made a big speech where he talked about the world essentially being split into two parts. I'm actually going to read you part of his speech, which will hopefully ring a few bells with you about things we've talked about this week. So, Truman's speech to Congress went something like, well, not something like this, it went like this. And he started by saying, "One way of life is based upon the will of the majority and is distinguished by free institutions, representative government, free elections, guarantees of individual liberty, freedom of speech and religion, and freedom from political oppression." I think I know who he's talking about there. Now, he went on to say, after he'd said all that, he went on to say, "The second way of life is based upon the will of a minority forcibly imposed on the majority. It relies upon terror and oppression, a controlled press and radio, fixed elections, and the suppression of personal freedom." think I know who he's talking about there as well. And he concluded, I believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. I believe that we must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own ways. So essentially what he was saying is, we are going to, us, America, we are going to help countries around the world stay free. Essentially, that's what he's saying. Okay. Now, as we know, he's talking when he talks about freedom, he's talking about democracy, which is what we have. We have free elections. We have a choice of who we can vote for, and if we're not happy with that government, we can get rid of them at the next election and things like that. We have freedom of speech, etc., which countries in the West, capitalist countries, tend to have. America, Britain, etc. And he's comparing it to communist countries who don't generally have those things. They're usually run by a dictator. Okay, so you don't have free elections. You do have elections, but you can only vote for one party, and generally there's a bit more censorship of the press and things like that. So Truman's saying, let's make sure that the world stays free and capitalist like us. Okay, we don't want other countries falling to communism, which is run by a dictatorship, and there's no freedom. Okay, now Congress accepted this, and Truman could now get to work with putting his doctrine, his plan, into action. Well, how was he going to do it? Well, he was going to do it via, or by, the Marshall Plan.